just you get to choose. Right? Like here's the scenario. The environment gives us something which can be perceived as negative, can be perceived as not working, can be perceived as problematic. The world's ending. But we get to choose to see it like that, or we get to choose to see it as an opportunity.
So clearly that it's my responsibility now to do that for other people. If I have information and, other people's success is my success and vice versa.
Because you know what? Like, the challenges or the roadblocks are the journey themselves.
There's no big things. It's all little things compounding on top of each other. And here we are back for another conversation on Truth Seekers. Coach Nick, what is up today? How you doing?
I am ready for more drums. How about this? Hit it, Coach.
There we go. There's my cue. What I would like to talk about today is authenticity. And that can mean a number of different things, but this is a pattern that I'm experiencing right now with most specifically in the pattern of expressing oneself. And I was reminded of an episode that Coach Z and I did a while back on passive aggressiveness. And the concept of that conversation is that we withhold things that we want to share with people in fear of what they might say or how they might react. And in the meantime, we build it up and it's not on the surface and we shove it down and then it explodes and comes out in ways that are very emotional. And then it swings too far in the other direction. So I'm on this re-kick, if you will. The kick has come back around on expressing oneself authentically, even in difficult situations. I'm just curious where that lands with you and how you think about that.
I think about projecting emotion. So rather than on how it feels for you, but on the receipt side of it. This week I had some clients talking about people in their team, and a certain person in this team who's very empathetic, very sensitive is described as. And so in terms of how they would work with that person, they kind of tiptoe around a little bit, and then that same person can come across very aggressive and like on the attack. And the manager said to me, I don't know what to do. Is he sensitive or is he aggressive? Like, what is it? And so for me, that's like the cycle, crazy emotion cycle, where he is feeling a place where he's vulnerable and feels like he's being attacked and therefore backs away. And so people feel like they can't say too much because they're backing away, getting shyer. And then after a while gets frankly fed up with feeling like that. So the emotion swings back around and he goes back to the offensive of it. It's like, rather than getting a piece of feedback and kind of shying away, now it's like, wow. And then so it presents like, okay, here's a piece of small feedback. And that person, you said earlier, the word is explodes back, seemingly doesn't align with the activity that just happened. Like the punishment didn't fit the crime. And so that place, it's like it's a projection of what's happening inside based on all those other things before. Like a long tail of events, if you will, that comes up to that point because of that non-expression in the first place. Because it presented in the first place as, okay, I won't say anything and just go away, or I'll actually call it out. So that's my experience of that just this week. So for sure, I mean, it's all the time.
And isn't it great as coaches, like that's how we frame a lot of our connections with our clients is, do we have permission to call it out and to be bold? When we notice that, we're gonna shout it from the rooftops. I think that's a form of being authentic, is when we see something, we say it. And that's not always welcome, a term we might use as being safe or secure in our communication, that what we share is accepted. So I think of that too. There's layers we can get into here because a lot of this is communication with other people around authenticity, right? That's kind of how this conversation is framed. But a lot of our communication or the way that we communicate gets swept under the rug. Like we want to say that, but the conversation just keeps flowing. So we're on to the next thing and we'll just try to make the best of it as we go, instead of like time out, pausing it. And like it causes a disruption. It might be uncomfortable to people. And so how might we think of that? Like if we know the right answer, we know what to do, but we're not, I don't know, is it a courage thing? Is it like, what prevents us from actually sharing those more obvious things?
Yeah, it is. It's a risk of conflict in a moment.
Yeah,
Is
confrontation.
it? Yeah. Is it? We're back to the pain and pleasure. Is it worth it in a moment? Am I just going to swallow it right now? And in the moment, it's small enough that you can just swallow it and move on and not deal with it. So it's more painful to be bold to say the thing that needs to be said. Or let me say it differently: not say the thing that needs to be said because that's it. It sounds like it's a given. Say the thing that you're feeling that you know that if you don't deal with it down the line, it's going to come back and get you and everyone else. It's easy to go, it's fine, next, and then that just goes back to the back of the pile and stacks on it, stacks and stacks on. To a certain point, when you don't really know when, it's just going to overflow, and like it's at that point, it's too late, and you can cause lots of damage.
Have we talked about the concept of hard, easy, easy, hard? You know what
Oh
that
yeah,
is? Yeah. Yeah, it's very easy to just brush it under the rug, and guess what? It gets harder to communicate with that person. But it's a
yeah.
temporary easy for a long term hard. I gotta watch my language here as I say that.
Ah!
But the reverse, right? The reverse is a temporary hard for a long term. It becomes easier to communicate with that person if you do the hard thing. It just takes a couple seconds, right? Yes, it might jostle and ruffle a few feathers, but if there's enough safety in communication, then you can have a discussion about that very thing. It doesn't become about the content. It becomes about the relationship that you have with that person.
That's right. Yeah, easy choice is hard life. Hard choice is easy life. It's long term thinking. It's second, third order thinking. If I don't address this, what happens down the line? And oh, gosh, coach, we work with this all the time. What happens is it creates communication issues in teams, and it becomes how do I? People don't know how to deal with it because they just think that's the way it is. But it's
Yeah.
just a stacking effect, and most of the time, it actually just sits in that middle place where it's kind of grey. It's not free flowing, so it doesn't feel fantastic, but it's not so bad that someone blows up and you've got to deal with something. It's actually most
Uh,
of the time just in that dead
Great.
time zone.
That's terrible. Yeah, the gray
That's the
area.
worst. As Coach Rich would say, no lukewarm water, right? Either freezing cold or boiling hot. At least we've got some leverage to do something because what happens when you're just in the lukewarm water? It's just it's just burning time. The only thing that's moving, time is still going. It's not so bad. You can't do anything. It's not so great. You want to do something. That's worse. Way worse. Give me the pain. So I can start to get to the pleasure.
Yeah.
Here's another visual, right? It's like if you're on the fence, pick a side because the only thing that can happen if you're on the fence is you fall off and you're going to hurt either way.
Hmm.
Just pick a side. Like go somewhere, go to the pain or go to the pleasure. Right? Like it's better. Like if you skip that thing that's small and stack it, I'd rather that tomorrow afternoon it's stacked high enough that you can have a real conversation about it. Now you don't
Hmm.
want to keep in that space because it's like being the fight or flight place all the time. You're going to age yourself way quicker. But I would suggest that that's way better than the grey area though. Like nothing
Yeah.
that could suck decades.
For people watching this, I feel like this resonates with a lot of most people, if not all, because we have so many different relationships that we have that maybe we have this authenticity with some or even most of the people that we communicate with, but everybody can pick up one example at least of somebody that they wish they had a more authentic relationship with. So what might we say to them with how they might approach it? And I have a couple ideas here, but I want to get your thoughts. Is decisiveness part of this conversation, which is picking a side, like you said, and choosing to be brave and to call this out? Is asking permission a good way to do it? Hey, like I want to bring something up that I've been thinking about, and I think it'll make this relationship stronger. Is it okay if I do that? What might we say to people who or share with people who are thinking about this and want to improve this for themselves?
Hmm. I would suggest that here's the first concept to think about. The closer you get to the actual issue, the more emotional it will be. And when I say the actual issue, I mean that flavor of the day, the thing that had the emotional explosion, because there's just a lot of heat around that at any given time. So you
Is
want to
that
bring
is
it.
that ego? Does emotion indicate ego, or is that something different?
Could be. When I talk about emotion, I'm talking general terms where you're not in control of your emotion, and so that scale will change from people to people, person to person, and situation to situation. If it's something that you've spent a lot of time practicing and building muscle around, perhaps you feel like you've got more strength in that area to be able to put yourself in a more loaded situation and still be able to deal with it and see through that. You know, that's where they're saying like things like I see red. It's like once you've done that, the mist descends, and it's like I don't know what happened. You know, just punched the guy in the face 5 times. So I don't know. I didn't even remember it. Like you want to take back from the situation as much as you can, like regardless of your training. This is the thing. So look, let's say you're a super trained martial artist, and you feel comfortable in any fight situation. You've been doing that since you were a child, and like you've done lots of competition. You've done everything. You've been in that place. You know what it feels like mentally. You know how to deal with your body physically. You still don't want to be going down a dark alley to meet 2 guys with knives. The best defense is not to be there in the first place, even if you are well trained. That's not to say you shouldn't be well trained, because those places are going to come up and you're like, oh man, I am down a dark alley with 2 guys with knives. And oftentimes it's just across the table with your wife or a colleague or your business partner or your friend or your like a relative, like whatever it is. And so you want to do the training, you want to do the work, but the first things first is that you want to not find yourself in that position. So you want to say, this is the route I want to take before I set off, and not just kind of meander across town and find yourself in a dark alley.
All right, so part is what you're saying, like just get out front of it from the beginning. Is that what you're saying? Like just train yourself on how to handle these as they come.
Talk about the situation itself is just a symptom of the problem. Right? It's like saying my foot hurts, my foot hurts, my foot hurts. All right, here's a bunch of pills, bunch of tablets. Have a shot, like, and come back. The doctor says my foot hurts. Okay, here's some more pills, tablets, shots. Like, good. And then you go, well, why not just take the rock out of my shoe? Like that. That's we can look at the symptoms, or we can look at the underlying problem, and it's just an agreement of how we should act in a particular relationship. It's just being misaligned that causes the symptoms. And so you said it already, like I go back to a resetting of the relationship with that person.
Got it.
Hey, we've been in some places right now, like recently, which I don't want to be in, and it doesn't feel good to me. And I'm sure it doesn't feel good to you for us to be in this place and this disagreement and this heat we've got. Is it okay if we talk about our relationship? You're really important to me. I want to have a really good relationship with you. Can we talk about how we can have our relationship and make it feel fantastic? Because that's what I really like. What do you think about that? And just almost like hit the rewind button to that starting point of, hey, I'd like to meet you again. Like, what's the way that I would set this up? An agreement of how I want to act around you, make a commitment to you, make a commitment back, and say it's really true. 9 times out of 10, you're going to find a way to go forward by doing that. And if you don't, that one time, then the question is, all right, well, then we shouldn't have this relationship, whatever it is, whatever type of relationship it is. And that's the same as the hot and the cold, right? Okay, then perhaps it's not what you wanted. You didn't want the cold. Like, you wanted to be in that relationship, but you realize that actually it's not viable. It's like having a business going, I love this business, I love this product, it's fantastic. And I make these things and they're beautiful. These widgets I make, they're so fantastic, and it cost me $100 to make, and people buy them for $90 and it's fantastic. And like, it's not a sustainable business. You're losing $10 and 6 hours of your time every time you're making one of these products. What are you doing here? Like, and so you get to choose: do you want to run yourself into a ground because that product's that important, or do you want to say, like, I love it, but it's not viable. It's not sustainable.
So don't be in the business. Don't be in the unsustainable business of poor relationships, is what you're saying. Just call it out, because I think part of this. These are my final thoughts, and I'd like to hear yours as we wrap here. This is somewhat unspoken too, right? It's not so obvious sometimes that there's friction. Like we can get into a rut with somebody who we've known for years, and like, this is just how it is. What do you mean? Like, they might not even be aware that you feel or I feel uncomfortable in that relationship, right? So I think there's also great strength in being able to do that in those types of relationships where you just want it to improve, and it could feel uncomfortable doing what we just said, right? But that's the solution, is calling it tight, calling it out. And I think there is a certain level of respect or whatever that follows after. Like, hey, I'm glad you did that. Like, I was just kind of used to it, right? Like, so that's how we don't pay attention to it. We get used to it. That's that lukewarm water, right? Just like kind of forget it's even there because we don't feel it. So I think there's great strength in that courage it takes to just even call it out, a less obvious situation, but what's on the other side is the great reward. It's just a much more fulfilling way to live. You actually make money in your business analogy, right? Like, find widgets where you make money and it's worth your time spending.
Yeah. And doesn't mean you don't love it. You should love it as well, but it's not everything in the equation. And you know what? Like, it just takes a little bit of vulnerability, because you might not even know what happened. You just get there, that relationship's like that, but you might not even realize you're there. So that first part of self-awareness is also key, to realize that that's the case. Sometimes you could be you can be in a place where you've been in a business relationship for decades and you don't even realize where you've got to, because it is so small. Not in between you, but just for yourself in the observation of it. So keeping it real, calling it tight, and just, that's what's so scary, is because you can easily slip into that comfort zone. As we know, like when you're in it, you often don't know that you are. That's the scariest place. So I think my takeaway here, Coach, is just to think about the vulnerability, because remember, there's a lot of strength in vulnerability. And so if you can push yourself into that place of being vulnerable in relationships, whatever type of relationship it is, feels like the place that you shouldn't go. It feels like you should push harder. Doesn't work, push harder. Actually coming back to grow, being vulnerable, it will put you in a different place. It will allow people to get that psychological safety to open.
And it's worth it. It's rewarding. You level up, you help others level up at the same time. A question I might ask myself with my relationships is, can it be better? Can it be better than the way that it is now? So if you're not sure, ask yourself that question. All right, Coach, we're getting the applause here and the cheer. We've come to the final part of the episode. Thank you for joining this week. This has been an interesting conversation around authenticity. Really appreciate it.
Thank you for watching another episode of Truth Seekers. We appreciate your interaction. So please comment, like, subscribe to YouTube, Apple Podcasts, or Spotify, wherever you get your podcasts. And if you want more, check out some of our links. Links to our masterclass, The Achiever's Mindset, and come join our LinkedIn group. And what do you want to see more of? Remember, we're here to share the simple secrets of successful. So help us do that. What do you want to see? What do you want to see more of? Thanks, and see you again next time.